Hello, chess family. It's me, National Master Jesse James, and today we're taking a look at another installment of Bobby Fischer's 60 Most Memorable Games. Now, this is a very long game. With that being said, it is a very good game. It's actually against one of my favorite chess players. Well, the only favorite chess player I have, um, uh, Tigran Petrosian, also known as the Iron Tiger or the Python. And he's known for slowly squeezing his opponent. He's just so solid. Let's see how Bobby Fischer does in this game. It's really cool that Bobby Fischer put in a game that he actually does not win. So let's take a look. In this game, we start off with c4, knight f6, starting off with the English. Later on, we'll be transposing to a different opening. Knight c3, g6, g3, bishop g7, bishop g2, castles. Knight f3, d6. Here, Petrosian's playing his English the way he should. And Bobby's over here saying, you know what, I want to play the King's Indian defense. So d6 is definitely telling Petrosian here that this is what he's looking for. Castles, knight c6, pawn to d3, a little slow at first, but you know, that is how Tigran like to play. And knight to h5, and this is definitely telling Bobby, hey, I'm coming, this is Bobby saying, I'm coming after you, Petrosian. Why? Well, whenever you play the King's Indian defense, when you play knight to h5, or basically move your knight anyway, black is going to be pushing this f pawn, and then the e pawn comes, and all of a sudden the king side attack starts. Well, typically in these games, especially for the English or even just the regular King's Indian for white will be going queenside. And you can see this because the pawn structure says, let's go this way. While you can see Bobby's pawn structure says, let's go this way, right? So it's a very, very fun game for black. I mean, I guess Petrosian likes these games as white. I don't like playing the white side of a... Of these King's Indian attacks. With that being said, Tigran just steps up and says, you know what, Bobby, game on. Pawn to d4. We're now in main line. e5 gets played, of course. Pawn to d5. This is Petrosian's patented move over here. Most of the times that he's playing in these lines for the King's Indian defense as white, he likes to play d5, grab a little extra space, and close the position. Which makes sense because, well, what's the rule? Whenever you're attacking on a wing, you should keep the center open. Wait a second. Why does Petrosian play this, right? Well, he grabs the extra space and he says, I'm going to be able to hold this. The rule is when you're attacking on the wing, open up the center. But Petrosian does not want this, so he just grabs the extra space. So, knight to e7, pawn to e4, and pawn to f5. Here, the kingside attack has started. Well, Petrosian saw a nice little idea, so he goes ahead and takes. Pawn takes back, and uh-oh, can you see the idea? Undefended knight, white to move and win a pawn. Hopefully you saw this tactic. It's not too hard. Remember, you're always more than encouraged to push pause during these games and try to figure out what the best moves are. Here, I don't think you need to push pause. You found it right. It's knight takes on e5, opening up the queen to attack the knight. Well, Fischer did not want to lose a pawn, so he finds the only tactic here to hold it. Can you see what Fischer plays back? Knight takes on g3, a desperado tactic. If you take, I take, and well, I'm actually attacking a rook over here, so you might not want to do that. And Petrosian's not up for the game, that kind of game. He goes ahead and plays h takes g3. With that being said, f takes g3 is also a very interesting move here because it opens up the f rook. That being said, I do like the way that Petrosian plays it, plays h takes g3. This is a lot safer, and remember the rule, always take back toward the center. All right, bishop takes on e5, and now, well, best move, pawn to f4. Why is this the best? Well, if you don't play f4, then Bobby will play f4. And believe me, you don't want Bobby coming after you. f4 would be a very strong move here to open up the game. You can see with f4 getting played, the bishop gets opened up, the knight can come to f5. The game is starting to open up here for the benefit of Bobby. So, pawn to f4, good move. Bishop g7, and nice and stern, bishop e3. Developing the rest of his pieces, and even looking to trade off this bishop. Remember, in the King's Indian, this bishop is worth about $5 to $6, or points. I like to use money because I'm greedy. So the bishop e3 is just going to be trading this guy off. Well, this is very good for him because this is the main defender and attacker. Again, this one's worth a little bit more. So if you can trade off this bishop, which is still only worth about 3, then you're already doing very good here. All right, we continue. Bishop d7, getting the last piece into the game. Bishop d4, knight g6, and rook e1. Just keep developing pieces. The game gets a little slow right here as there's really not too much play here since, well, f4 kills a lot of the counterplay. But Petrosian was known for that. Any kind of little counterplay that you'd have, Petrosian was able to sense it and stop it before it even began. All right, Rook F7, a very good move by Bobby here. If the bishop takes, Bobby's thinking, I'll probably take back with my rook. And, well, there's only one weak pawn over here on the king side, which is this g3 pawn. So there's ideas about rook takes, and then the rook would be putting pressure on g3. And even then, whenever the rook's here, you can see knight takes f4 ideas because of the pin. Okay. A nice move here. Bishop to f3, just getting out the way. Queen f8, allowing the rook to jump in a little bit later. Excuse me. King f2, of course, it's a good idea to jump off this g-file, as we know what rook will be taking later on. Rook e8 and trades, 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 and now a strong move, queen to d4. And here, white definitely has a good plus. In fact, computer's already given this +2 advantage. Although no pawns have been won, it's saying, well, white's about significantly up 2 pawns. With that being said, this is a solid position for black. Well, what's black's weaknesses? Well, we have 2 isolated pawns over here, right? Okay. Is that enough for a win? Maybe not. There's a lot of pieces around here who can defend. But I will tell you, the f5 pawn is the weakest pawn in this game, and you're going to see how Petrosian starts putting pressure on it. And, well, again, we are making white does have more space. The pieces look a lot better placed. But, again, because there's no big weaknesses here, Bobby's going to do a very good job defending. And this is very hard for a lot of people. In these kind of positions, black really feels like they're being cramped, like they have nothing going. They might sacrifice a pawn and try to go for an attack. Be like Bobby. Be passive. Be patient, okay? Don't go crazy here. There's no losing positions just yet. There's no losing ideas for you just yet, so just stay solid. You can see how Bobby just waits around while Petrosian keeps trying to better his position. That's one thing I did like about this game when I read it. Fischer does say about Petrosian, you know, every time Petrosian was in a good position, he slowly made his position better and better. And you're going to see that how, well, you know, the queen's a very good piece, the knight's a good piece, the bishop's a good piece, the rook will be going to e1 for a good piece. We look at Fischer's pieces, this knight's definitely one of the worst pieces on the board. Why? Well, take a look. Where can it move to? I guess it can move to defend. This rook, decently placed, but g3 is not the biggest weakness here. You have to get the queen in front, and gosh, where do you put the queen? And the bishop, well, the bishop's actually on the best square it can be, but it's not doing too much here because it's being blocked in by that pawn. You can imagine if f4 did get played, how much more fun Bobby would have had this game. All right, let's continue. Bobby sees the a7 pawn is being attacked, so simple chess. Let's just defend. Pawn b6, rook h1. The rook is going to a nice open file over here, and you're going to see how Petrosian puts pressure on the f5 pawn. In fact, let's just do a quick exercise right here. We did mention that f5 pawn is the weakest pawn. Go ahead in your head, figure out where the white pieces need to be placed to put pressure on f5. Now, this is a very good thing to practice because when you're in your chess games, you can do this, right? Think about where your pieces are best placed. All right, hopefully you found the idea. The rook most likely will go to h5 to attack on f5. This knight, hopefully you found the idea. Knight d1, e3 attacking f5. And then the bishop, well, simple chess, bishop e2, d3. If you really want to get the queen in there, you can put the queen to c2. Or maybe even queen f6 here to attack on f5 also. Again, think about these ideas. These are the ideal positions for your pieces. Find the weakness and then find where you're supposed to be putting them. All right, let's continue. Pawn to a5, another nice move here. Bobby has a very nice pawn chain that, well, c7 is the only weakness. And when you have these kind of pawn chains, it's good to know where your base pawn is because this is the only weak pawn. If you get to this pawn, well, then all the other pawns start getting weak. So we only have one weakness here on c7, and you can see that the rook, the queen, lots of pieces can guard the c7 square. All right, here, Petrosian starts the attack on f5. Knight d1, queen f8, knight e3, rook f7. A very nice idea here by Fischer. Do you know what Fischer's plan is here? Feel free to push pause. Now, this is not a winning plan as far as just winning the game, but it's going to help alleviate his position. What's his plan? Well, Petrosian plays b3 soft, and the idea here was to play queen g7. Trading off the queens is definitely a good idea here. In the endgame, it's going to be a lot easier to defend your weaknesses than it will be for the endgame. In the endgame, Bobby is able to definitely hold out a lot longer. Okay, well, you're pretty much forced to trade here. If you don't trade queens, then this queen gets to control the only big open diagonal in this game. So, queen takes on g7, king takes on g7, and pawn e3. A nice move here saying maybe we'll go b4 later. But first, let's keep improving our pieces. Rook f8. Again, Bobby's just going to be waiting back and forth, just waiting in this game, which is very hard for a lot of people. You get very, you're undisciplined and you just don't know what to do, so you feel like you have to attack. Bishop e2, knight e7, bishop d3. You can see how the pieces are nice and slowly getting ready to attack this isolated pawn. Pawn h6 and rook h5. And now a tricky move here by Fischer, because why not? Bishop to e8. Can you see why it's a bad idea to snack attack and grab this extra pawn right here? In the game, rook h2 got played. What's wrong with taking the pawn? Knight takes check, okay. Knight takes back, or else, we could take on h6 next. So knight takes, and well, your rook's being attacked, so you have to move it. So rook takes, and what was the idea here? Well, the idea here is very simple. Look at this rook. It can't move anywhere. So it's actually trapped. So all you gotta do is play rook to h8, and now the bishop comes to g6, and there's no way you cannot stop from losing the exchange here. With that being said, this is now a lost position, and well, you got tricked by Fischer, which don't worry, you won't be the only one. Back to the game, rook h2 got played, bishop to d7, rook h1, a nice little waiting game here, rook h8, knight to c2. Again, Petrosian's able to keep bettering his pieces. Where's the knight going to? The knight on e3 was doing a good job attacking the f5 pawn, but now the knight's being redirected to... That's right, it's going to d4. Not only will it still attack the f5 pawn, but here it's helping attack the weak squares. I love when there's a knight behind a pawn like this, because you can see the knight works with it good by controlling all the squares. Not once, but now twice. Alright, king f6, knight to d4. King g7, again, black's just going back and forth. Bishop e2, knight to g8, and now pawn to b4. Here, Petrosian's finally ready to start pushing forward. And knight to g8 is the perfect time because, well, with the knight going to g8 over here, it blocks the rook from sliding over. If you played b4 right away, Fischer would be more than happy to slide over, and he'll take the open file. The knight now blocks, even though the knight was trying to go to a good square. Knight f6 got played. Bishop to d3, a nice little tempo attacking the pawn. Now this stops Fischer from being able just to take, and play rook a8 because, well, you just lose a pawn here. Probably knight takes on f5 check, I would play here. So, with that being said, Fischer goes ahead and stops it. He plays pawn takes, king to g6, and then allows rook to a1. King g6 just defends the pawn. Alright, knight check, king e2, rook e8, and king to d2. Question here. Should we play rook to e3 here to go for the win, or simply play something like knight f6? Alright, hopefully you found it. Who thinks it was knight f6? Who thinks it was rook e3? Rook e3 playing for the win is a losing game. Here, the computer's already giving +2 here. Rook a7, rook takes on g3, rook takes on c7 with a nice tempo off the bishop. In fact, the bishop's almost being trapped here. Not only will this pawn fall, but these two pawns are soon to fall behind it. And, well, it looks like this h-pawn should be enough to win the game because, well, your piece is doing a very good job controlling it. Unfortunately, the computer disagrees here and says, there's too many things that are going to be going wrong here. For instance, if this bishop ever moves away, the f5 pawn will fall, and yeah, you're more than welcome to go ahead and probably sacrifice a piece for one of these pawns, because when these pawns fall, you're going to get two passed pawns over here, and that should be enough for Petrosian to win the game. Alright, back to the game. Again, Fischer has great discipline. He just keeps defending. Knight f6 got played, rook a6, rook b8, rook a7, rook c8. And now, here I challenge you to see if you could push forward in this game. What are some ideas here to make progress for white? Yeah, this is a very tough position here, guys. I mean, what would you play here? I had a few people mention a few cool ideas. Maybe bishop c2, a4. Not a bad idea. By trading off the slide square bishop, you see that e6 and c6 become weak. Although the bishop and knight do such a great job by putting pressure on f5, I don't know why you want to do that. Maybe knight c6. I don't like this idea at all. I'm sure Fischer would be more than happy to snack attack over here, and after d takes, well, you can make pressure over here, and f5 is no longer weak, so black is definitely holding steady in these games. Alright, with that being said, what did Petrosian play? Beautiful chess right here, pawn to c5 pushing forward. It looks like an impossible move, but this is the only way to keep pushing forward without losing, and still give yourself plenty of winning chances. Well, if we don't take, we're just going to be losing, right? Oh, wait a second, is this a free pawn right here? Be careful, Petrosian got you. If you took the pawn on d5 here, pawn c6, and uh-oh, you just lost a piece. Why? If the bishop does move away, bishop takes f5, and uh-oh, you just lost your rook. Or worst case, best case scenario, you lose a bishop here. Okay, so that pawn's taboo. We can't take it. So pawn takes, pawn takes, and now a nice move, knight to f3. Because the d pawn's gone, now we see the e5 pawn is back in action. E5 square is back in action. King f7, check. King e7, takes, and bishop takes f5. Here, I think this would be an easy winning position here for white, as you got the rook and bishop versus the knight and rook. But this is Bobby Fischer, and, well, he's known to be a very good chess player. And he defends quite nicely. Rook f8, g4, king d6, bishop takes, king takes. Now we're down to a rook and pawn endgame. With that being said, I would think this is just winning here for white. But computer and obviously Fischer disagrees with that, saying, yeah, this is very drawish. It's amazing to me because, well, black has 3 isolated pawns. In fact, 2 of them are going to be doubled. While we see that we have the f and g pawn, if the h pawn falls, then we have 2 nice passed pawns. With that being said, king e3, rook check, king f3, king d6, check, takes. Again, I am almost just baffled here that this is not just a win. Apparently, there was one variation here for a win, but Petrosian does miss it. I wonder if you can find where it's at. In the game we continued, c4 was played, which apparently was a mistake. And what would you play here as white? Well, in the game, Fischer plays rook h1. And this, Petrosian plays rook h1 here, which was not good enough. Fortunately, this just leads to a draw, apparently. While Fischer in the book does recommend this line of rook h7, c6, rook check, king c5, rook d1. Apparently, this is the route. c3, g5, c4, g6, c2, rook over. Oh my gosh, look at this crazy line. These 2 passed pawns versus the other one. And this is a winning position now. King g5, f6, f7, and rook takes. Why? Well, if you do play rook over to f8, and maybe this is the best way to play, g7, rook takes, you make a queen here, and this is going to be a winning position here. Maybe there's some ideas about trying to set up a fortress, but I have a feeling this Petrosian guy is pretty good and can definitely figure it out. Alright, with that being said, back to the main game. Rook h1 got played, and now it simplifies to a draw. Pawn c3, g5. I mean, the game looks almost identical to the other one, at least in my eyes, but I'm sure there's some grandmaster who knows the real reason for these ideas. Rook takes c2 check, king takes. And now, well, again, they took a draw pretty early. I believe they took a draw after f7 over here. Yeah. Oh, no. I think they took a draw. Where was it? They took a draw over here, so we're not there. f7, rook takes on g6, check, but c3 is the main line. And back to this one, king f4, king d2, rook takes, king g5, c4, f6, c3, f7, and here they go ahead and take the draw. That being said, I'll go ahead and show you the final position of what would have happened. Because to me, this was not so clear it was a draw. Maybe you're better endgame theory than I am. I wouldn't be surprised. Check it out. Rook over to a8, g7, king b2, queen, rook takes, queen takes. And now I do know this. This is a thematic draw here. Why? All you have to do is hide your king in the corner and you can never take this pawn. So, c2, queen check, queen c3 check, queen b3 check, king a1. And you can never take this pawn because, well, if you do take, it's going to be a stalemate. A very nice trick here at the end. But again, these guys saw this from all the way back over here on rook a8, which is just very impressive to me. This Bobby Fischer guy is pretty good. Also, Petrosian, my favorite player. Great. Well, guys, hope you enjoyed this game. This was number 3 of Bobby Fischer's my 60 most memorable games, Bear Hug. He definitely got hugged by Petrosian here, also known as the Python. We'll see you guys in the next video.